Welcome to this episode of the Essential Church Podcast, an ongoing conversation about some of the most important issues facing the local church today. I'm your host, Andrew Arndt, and today I want to take you to a conversation that we had recently with Pastor Brady around the question of how do we respond to local and global crises. As we know, in the last 18 months, we have seen more than our fair share of those crises. And a lot of people are talking these days about crisis fatigue. I think that a lot of pastors are experiencing that. And so it's important for us, I think, to have a grid for thinking about how we're going to address these things that pop up locally and globally, and in what way we're going to address them, and also in what spirit we're going to address them. We cover all those things and more in this conversation. We think you're going to enjoy it. Well, guys, something that entered my vocabulary, I think a lot of our vocabulary for the first time last year, was something known as crisis fatigue. I had never heard that until we were in the midst of a global pandemic and race riots were happening and people storming the Capitol and crazy things happening everywhere. And if people were fatigued in the pews, leaders were also very fatigued. And I think, when I step back and look at it, I think that part of the fatigue with crisis is that we don't always know how exactly to respond and which things demand our response. There's not like a really good grid for working that out. And so even when we do make decisions, we're not sure if we made the right decision. Sure. And so we've been having some conversation about that recently. Brady, you're a great leader on this as we've navigated the uncharted territory of last year. You helped keep us moving in a good direction, and I think that you mitigated a lot of that fatigue for us. So talk to us about what was going on in your head and how you think about responding to crisis, both globally and locally.
Well, the fatigue is real, and I think the reason most of us came into ministry is because we cared deeply about people who are hurting or who are away from God. And over the last couple of years, that's been put to the test. And we only have, let's just be honest, pastors and leaders who are watching, we have a finite amount of emotion to give out. Right. We don't have an endless supply of empathy. I mean, it has to be resupplied. I mean, you can run out. In fact, one of the great concerns I have for my own soul is that I stop feeling and stop caring because of so much so many things that are requiring my empathy. And I'll give you, so I believe that we are primarily responsible for the people in front of us and for the communities that we live in. So let me give you an example. So just in the last few weeks, we had a major hurricane that struck our nation. We had, at the same time, we were trying to evacuate people out of the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. And at the same time, there were other issues surfacing locally and nationally. And so we had to make a decision, which one of these warrants our attention. Well, for us, we live in a military town and many of the people sitting in front of us knew people in Kabul, had served in Afghanistan, and had a vested interest in what was going on in Afghanistan. So for us here at New Life Church, we said, we're a military town, and while many of us have never been to Afghanistan, and it seems like, it is thousands of miles away, we knew we had to give some attention and relief and give resources to the issue in Afghanistan because of how it was affecting the people in front of us. So I think the first lens, when you're thinking about how should I spend my money, how should I use my empathy, how should I give compassion out of the pulpit, ask yourself this question: what are your people talking about in the lobby?
Where am I? It's very good.
Because if they're talking about it in the lobby, you need to talk about it in the pulpit. And we've talked about that on other podcasts. But being aware of what's pulling on the hearts of your people, because I'm responsible to help them respond.
It's so tempting to think, or for me to think, that Twitter is the real world. So I see people tweeting about this or that, and my leadership anxiety starts to get up and think, maybe I need to say something about that, and then to remember this is not reflective of the population, let alone our congregation. And there is a phenomenon. I was talking to a counselor a couple months ago over coffee. He goes to our church, and he was talking about this phenomenon called doom scrolling. Talk about another phrase that is new to me anyway. And doom scrolling, the idea of just scrolling on your phone, and it's doom. Every tweet, everything. And you feel anxious because your awareness has outpaced your agency. So I'm aware of more things than I actually have agency to do something about. And maybe one of the best things I can do, the best things we can do as leaders, is to spend less time on social media unless it is the social media posts of our people. When I look on Facebook as a contrast to Twitter, just anecdotal, I see New Lifers posting on Facebook about Afghanistan or about the tours that they serve. That is totally different than national pundits, pontificating on Twitter about this or this or this.
And people are carrying anxiety. My wife was talking to a nurse, one of the leading nurses here in our town. She said last night that domestic violence calls are up 400% in our county this year to date, which is a sign that people are carrying so much. They're backed up, they're pent up, they're anxious. And so I think this is where, especially as leaders, you have to pick the people that you're spending time with. We can't always, very much of your job as a leader, people are choosing you and you've got to be responsive to crises and step into situations, absolutely. Which all the more means when you have agency to pick who you're spending time with, you need to be very careful about that. And Edwin Friedman, he'll talk about people, look for people who are non-anxious presences. Father John O'Donohue, he said, learn to dwell with people of ease, So leaders, Google A Blessing for One Who is Exhausted by Father John O'Donohue. Beautiful. Let that be a poem, a prayer for you. A blessing for one who is exhausted. Learn to dwell with people of ease because the world is crazy right now and we need a bit of a reprieve.
So when you're thinking about the responsibility of your church, I love that when the early church in Jerusalem they were commissioned by Jesus, and he said, "Go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then the uttermost parts of the earth." And I find that those four things fascinating. Jerusalem is obviously the center of their neighborhood, the places where they were spending most of their time and money. And he says Judea, which is more the region, the countryside, the area that you live. And then he says Samaria. Now, when he said Samaria to the Jewish people, they would have never thought of doing ministry in Samaria.
Sure, right.
So what he was saying is, go to the places that trouble you, that are going to test you and stretch you, that are going to cause you to cross over racial and economic disparities and boundaries. And then after you've done that, then go to the uttermost parts of the earth.
Right.
But go to your neighborhood, go to the region that you live, go to the area that's the most troubling for you, that causes you to have to confront your prejudices, and confront the things that are troubling your heart. And then after you've settled all that, then use your resources to go into all the world.
And your time is not spent evenly in those four quadrants.
No,
it's mostly Jerusalem.
Yeah,
you live in Jerusalem. Your life flow is in Jerusalem. Your carpool pickup is in Jerusalem. You can hop to Judea quickly. Samaria is more occasional. So you can't do that every single day. So it's not all equal measures. So understand you've got to pace yourself and allot your time in a way that's sustainable.
Exactly. It's not equal weight. Neither is it sequential in time. So it's not necessarily only when you do these, then can you move on. You can dip in and out, but with different weighting. Brady, you've talked about how our collaboration and kingdom partnerships is sort of how this thing happens, because you may not be able to physically be in these places, but that doesn't mean, oh my goodness, I can't do anything about that. So how do pastors discern the specific partnerships that allows them to make a splash somewhere else or make a difference somewhere else?
Well, we don't invest our money anywhere where we don't have trusted relationships. And that's why it's important. I just came back from Costa Rica and Guatemala, and my purpose for going on those trips was to look at the work that we were already doing, but also to look for better partnerships, new partnerships, trusted relationships, because it's not a matter if, it's when I'm going to have opportunities. And when you have opportunities, the worst feeling in the world is seeing a great need in an area of the country. You have resources that you want to give to that region of the world, but you have no one that you can call. And so you have to do the legwork up front. If you're going to be, I several years ago, we made a shift in our global thinking that we were going to spend a lot of our resources in Central and South America, because that was the area of the world, number one, that was most accessible to us, but was also the area of the world that was coming into our world, causing misunderstandings. There was a lot of pain, and
that's that Samaria piece.
I was going to say Samaritans were coming to us.
Yes.
Who wants to go to Honduras when in most Americans' mind, and the Honduran people hate this because they've told me, but when you say Honduras, to most Americans, they say M19 gang or
Right.
gang members. And so when I was in Honduras in front of some pastors, they said, please go back and tell your people that's a very
not who we
small
are.
percentage of people that are in gangs. We're here loving Jesus like you love Jesus. And so for me, it was my Samaria.
Yes.
To go into Tegucigalpa, to go into a neighborhood that is controlled by those gangs. I
Yeah.
was there at noon one day, and the pastor is standing there in his congregation. The whole neighborhood is controlled by that violent gang. And he said, Pastor Brady, please tell your people that there are a group of people here worshiping Jesus in the middle of a great storm, and we need your help. Now, when I hear of trouble or maybe a hurricane has come to Honduras or flooding,
Yeah.
in fact, flooding just happened in Honduras, and we were able to send money,
So good.
we bought some boats actually
amazing.
because of the pastors that
Yes,
we knew in
exactly.
Honduras. And so those relationships are so important.
And in that way, it just strikes me that God's saving work actually happens in two directions. Then in that way, that we're both sending help, we have meaningful partners, we can do good work, but then also our perceptions are changing.
Very good. Yes.
Which gets to something that you were sharing with us in a meeting recently. You said that I've got two major criteria for thinking about where we create global partnerships. One, can I mobilize my people towards this? And then two, the second one was, where can we do the most good? Can you unpack both of those things?
Yeah, so churches usually line up on one or two of these camps with missions. There's one group of churches, they want to be the special forces. They want to go into the worst places. If you're not in a very dangerous, difficult place, then you're not doing real missions. The problem with that, only a handful of elite special forces missions people are even qualified to go to those places.
Yep.
And you should be sending people into those places. But that's ignoring 98% of your church who needs to catch a heart for global missions. So I remember one time I went to Kenya, and I love Kenya. But a real hardcore missions guy goes, there's plenty of missions work in Kenya. You should be in Somalia. And I thought, I can't take a little homeschool family or a little middle.
Right.
I can't take my high school youth group to Mogadishu, but I can take them to Nairobi. and what I said to him was, if I take a group of people to Nairobi and introduce them to the beauty of mission work, then I will find some special forces soldiers. But you don't day one, you're not a
start
special
there.
force. I'm in a military town, so day one, you're not a Navy SEAL.
Right.
Day one, you go to basic training, and out of basic training, they take the best of the best.
Yeah.
Those people become Navy SEALs, but 98% of military people don't end up in special forces for a
Right.
reason.
Yeah.
But they're also 98% of our military is very important. And so I just think we got to think about our church. Where can you take your people where their hearts will be awakened to missions work? And where can you send some of your special forces, hardcore missions people to do some really hard work?
So let me ask, to the people who are listening that are fatigued, crisis fatigue, 18 months has caught up with them, their adrenaline has run out, they're listening to this as they kind of clean the sleep out of their eyes and wonder how they can make it another week. How have you guys found to recover? How, if the goal is to go for the long haul, how do we make sure this moment doesn't crush us? How have you all figured out how to recover so that you can keep going?
Stay close to Jesus and find good friends, right? I mean, that's the thing. I think drawing daily from the source. And then we are so fortunate. I know that not everybody has this, but we're so fortunate to have each other. And as things were blowing up all over the world, for us to be able to lean into each other and you doing okay, you doing okay. So I think you got to stay close to Jesus and find good friends.
Yeah, there's a lot of pastors who are loneliness is their greatest enemy right now. They just don't have the friendships to lean on. It's a cord of three strands is not easily broken, and most pastors feel like one tattered strand right now, and they're looking for some other strands. And this is one of the reasons that, and this is not a commercial, but it's an invitation. This is why we do our Essential Church learning communities. This is why we do things for pastors that involve us getting together. It's one of the reasons we're doing the podcast. We hope this feels like a couple of friends sitting at we're around a dining table. We hope that you feel like you're sitting right here with us having this conversation. We hope you feel the strength of the relationship. Go for walks, get some sun on your face, eat well, go to guard your sleep.
Yeah.
And I know as an older man, the oldest one at the table here today, I can tell you that a good night's sleep is the best thing I can do for my pastoral ministry. I pray, I read scriptures, I meditate, I listen to worship music. But oftentimes, even with all those things, if I check off all those boxes, but I go 2 or 3 nights without going to bed on time, sleeping on time, getting that rest, I wake up, my mind's in a fog, my body doesn't feel good.
Right.
And a lot of what physical things that we're feeling right now is because we're medicating on we're medicating ourselves.
Yes.
And there's no substitute for good food,
Eat
good
well,
exercise,
sleep well.
and go to bed.
I love that you're talking about those physical, specific things. And I think another layer to add to that, just for some practical things, is on the emotional level. Take an inventory of your soul. My wife is a counselor by training, and so she's very good about helping us even at the dinner table. What are you sad about? What are you mad about? What are you anxious about? You know, what are you glad about? And I'll be honest, there are many times when I feel just the cloud, the storm, and I can't name it. But usually it comes out because I've snipped at someone or I've barked at one of my kids, and then I think, what's actually going on? And I have to sit down and pull out a journal and actually make myself just an inventory of the soul before God. And the Psalms are the prayerful way of doing that. You pray the Psalms, you pray these emotions before God, and that's helpful. But sometimes just to get real concrete, like can I actually name these emotions before God? So it's not an end in itself. It's not just venting, but by naming it before God, you're placing yourself before God and saying, Lord, mend me, create me a clean heart.
And I think Sabbath, 1/7 of your life being useless.
Yeah.
Like just useless in the presence of the Lord, you've got to go back out for 6 more days and go hard. And the Lord wants to give you a day where you can do nothing and find out that you're loved, find out that you're not that important in the world. And there is someone who keeps the thing spinning. And so Sabbath is the one concrete way in our calendars that we can every week say, you know what, the storm will keep raging, God will be in control, I'm going away, and I'm turning off my phone, and I'm not going to be useful at all today.
I love that psalm, be still and know that I'm God. But the word be still actually means let go.
Let go.
And that's what Sabbath makes you do. It's just turn your hands off of it, take your hands off put your phone away.
Put your phone away.
Quit scrolling. Just focus on the beauty. Focus on something beautiful for an entire day. Let go, be still. And I think that's the only way to restore our souls. And that then gives us the ability when we come back in to be more focused. What happens after Sabbath is you have greater clarity about what's in front of you. And just too many pastors are trying to charge ahead in their own strength day after day after day. And so they've got a cloudy vision. And the only thing to clear your vision is to sit still.
Okay, so I want to just pivot slightly and offer some observations that I have of you, watching you in these last 18 months. And of course, you're seasoned in leading us through crisis. We affectionately refer to you as our Winston Churchill, through many crises at
the
New
darkest hour.
But I think these 3 things, and you comment on it or add to it or change it or whatever, but the first is clear decisions. There are these moments of crisis where, okay, what are we going to do about this? Or what are we, everything was changing all the time about the situation. Brady, what are we going to do about how many chairs and masks or this or that? So clear decisions, but then secondly, quick adjustments. Just because you make a decision doesn't mean you can't circle back on it. Sometimes the worst thing to do in a crisis is to double down. And be like, no, we said we would never. Clear decisions, but quick adjustments. It's okay. And then the third thing is kind hearts. You've said repeatedly, we are not all at our best right now. So if someone has an angry moment or overreacts in a meeting, don't, it's okay.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. But I do think that at some point there has to be a decision made. And then own it. And then be willing to adjust. And I do think it takes more courage right now to be kind than angry. And I really feel that I even said this last night to a group of leaders, that I keep hearing these demands for me to take these angry stands against cultural issues. And actually the bar is pretty low right now for representing Jesus. Just being nice and being kind makes you stand out right now.
Right. That's
I mean, I don't want to, I'm not going to add my voice to an angry mob. I'm actually going to stand over here to the side and say, hey, let's follow the way of Jesus together. And, I just don't see many angry outbursts from Jesus. Most of his angry outbursts were toward religious people.
yeah.
But I just
Not
don't
the
see
world.
Jesus standing shaking his fist at a evil Rome, or he wasn't shaking his fist at the Greeks, the broken sexuality of the Greeks. He was actually kind, and I think that's something the Lord has put in me. We're going to be kind. We're not giving up our convictions. We see the brokenness in the world. We're called to respond to the brokenness in the world. But when we respond, can we bring something that's worth giving? Let's bring the fruits of the Spirit with us.
Yep.
Let's bring something that's life-giving. Let's give them a cup of water instead of an angry fist. And I think that's the hope of the world right now.